This episode is a bit tricky for me because advice can be quite harmful sometimes. And that's actually my first piece of advice. I was one of those kids growing up that would go onto YouTube and look up as many sort of advice motivation videos. And the thing I've learned about advice is sometimes it can be more harmful than it is helpful, especially if you're not given the context of it. And that's because there is a sort of hyper response people can have to advice. For example, and this applies a lot to general pieces of advice. A lot of times on the internet, especially if you go on like Instagram Reels and you're only consuming these 60-second bits, you'll hear advice that goes, put your head down and work harder. And the person delivering that piece of advice means well. They want society to follow their dreams. And they know, probably from experience, that to follow your dreams, you need to work hard. But when you think about the people receiving that piece of advice, you can categorize them into two groups. The first group are genuinely lazy people, people that probably need that piece of advice. But if you listen to that, chances are that one thing isn't going to help you. You're just genuinely lazy. You're not going to listen to that and all of a sudden kick into gear. You probably just need to learn it the hard way at some point. But then there's this second group of people, the people that are already insecure about the level that they're working. And they hear that and it makes them more insecure. So the person delivering that piece of advice is intending it for the lazy people, but really the people that they're going to hit are the ones that are probably going to hyper respond and feel worse about themselves. And this can go for many people. Oh, you should, this goes for many pieces of advice. You should work out more. The people that just don't care about working out, or again, just don't prioritize it, they're not going to receive that to the extent that the people that are insecure about their own bodies and already know that they need to work out more, they listen to that and they go, oh, maybe I need to work out even more, or I feel worse about myself because I see this extreme and I hear this guy yelling at me on Instagram Reels. All to say, I was one of those guys, especially when it came to purpose-driven work ethic, productivity, motivation. And a lot of my life, I think I would feel bad about myself anytime that I would work hard in a day, I would consume a piece of that content and then go, I could have done more. All to say, advice without the story behind it or the context behind it, I think can be quite harmful. So the next 4 pieces of advice, I'm going to give my own personal experience. And oftentimes, I think most people will learn more from that story than they will the sort of one-liner piece of advice. That is just a beware. And that goes for anything. Just beware about advice in general. Because oftentimes, again, there's a lot more context needed. Capiche? Capiche. So let's start with the first actual sort of piece of advice. And to give you a little context, in that I was on a very traditional path in life until I became 20 years old. And at 20, we had this thing called COVID come about. And in that time, I started to do this internet thing. And instead of my life going this one path, it started to veer off in a way that was sort of luck, but sort of preparation, as that one line goes. But today, I live a life that, I'm not going to lie to you, I enjoy. I feel a lot of purpose. And looking back, I think there were certain guidelines and things that I followed that I wish I knew earlier. And that is sort of the purpose of this video. I want to give you all 4 more pieces of advice that I think really shaped me into the person I am today. Beginning with my goal as someone who's 25 and exploring the arts and just life in general. I heard this, I believe, from Sahil Bloom, who says, my goal right now is to maximize my surface area of luck potential. Now, that is a very that is a very wordy way of saying so much of the opportunity you get in life is luck and preparation meeting luck. And how can you put yourself in as many situations where you get lucky? That's not meaning that the piece of advice isn't try to get as lucky as possible. We have no control over luck. However, how can you put yourself in as many situations as possible to get lucky? One example recently that has happened, I have a friend, a mentor, I should say, who's a director. She's an incredible person in my life, directed some features, some of my favorite movies and documentaries. And I'm someone trying to be a director one day and someone that wants to make work just like hers. And I was telling her about an experience, a trip I wanted to go on in December of last year. And I was sort of iffy on whether or not I should go. It was sort of with someone that I didn't know all too well in a area in the world. It was in Joshua Tree. And there's a part of me that was like, it's really easy for me to be like, no, probably shouldn't. I think there's just too many like variables and is this a distraction or all that? And I was telling her about this. And she was saying, whenever you're given this decision, whether to not experience something or experience something, always experience it. Even if it might bite you in the ass later, experience it. Because you never know what you'll sort of get and learn from that. And I was really happy I went on this trip because I learned a lot about humans. And I learned a lot about a perspective that I personally never had. Versus if I didn't go on this trip, I would not have. And this goes for a lot of what I've done in the last 5 years of my life. When it was COVID, I had this opportunity to go to Los Angeles. I was a junior in Indiana University, and I had an opportunity one weekend to just fly out to LA. And in that moment, I went, you know what? Let's do it. I don't know who I'm meeting. I don't know. It's a little scary, but those sorts of connections I made there in 2020 still bring me dividends today. Whether that's even one of the biggest quote unquote failures in my life was this ice cream shop project that I worked on moving to New York. For those that don't know, I moved to New York because I opened an ice cream shop. I co-founded this ice cream shop that was social media found. Again, another story for another day. But I mean, if to know the one-liner of it, after 18 months, it closed down. And knowing that, it's hard. I think, that's a hard thing to swallow, but the amount I learned about commercial real estate in New York City and the connections I got in that world and raising money and, hiring 20 to 25 people and operations and supply chain, that was worth it. And that was me putting myself in a situation that experienced a lot more than if I didn't put myself in that situation. And this is sort of a mantra I take with me as I continue this really creative journey I am on right now. Anytime I find myself in this decision, something that might feel highly uncomfortable, I hedge on saying, let's just do it. Let's experience more, because you don't know what you're going to pull from later on. There's a great quote by Steve Jobs in his Stanford commencement speech where he says, you can only connect the dots looking backwards. And one thing that he did was when he was in college, he took this calligraphy class, not because it was part of any curriculum, but just because he was interested in calligraphy. And Reed College had one of the best calligraphy schools at all. And he just loved that this was a art that was inexplainable from science, by science, but it looked beautiful. And 10 years later, when developing, I believe it was the Macintosh, it was the first personal computer that created typefaces that looked beautiful. And before that, I'm assuming that it was all sort of black terminals and fixed width fonts. That changed the course of personal computing. And especially at the time, computers were sort of this like Terminator-esque thing, but this made it friendly. And he says, you can only connect the dots looking backwards. So experience more. My third piece of advice is all about friends. And there is that saying that you are the average of the 5 people around you. That quote is big, but there's actually an edit I've heard on that quote that I think is a bit more accurate. I heard that you're not the average of the 5 people around you. Rather, everyone falls to the lowest common denominator of the 5 people around you. There was this experiment I heard of where this manager in an office building wanted to see how implementing walking treadmills in that office, how that would affect the workers, right? The walking treadmills you put under a desk so people can get some extra steps in when they work. And in this office particularly, there was, for our example, there was 5 people in this office that varied on their fitness levels. There was someone that was really athletic. There was someone who was very sedentary, and the spectrum of the middle. After giving everyone walking treadmills, the theory was everyone would walk the amount of the average person. But in reality, after a couple months, everyone ended up walking the amount the person that was walking the least did. Even the most active person, they walked basically the amount that the person who didn't really walk did. Everyone fell to the most sedentary version of it. I find that experiment fascinating. And I think that's really true because oftentimes the person who is doing the least is taking the path of least resistance. And when you're given that option, it's really easy to go, yeah, honestly, let's just do that tonight. Oh, we should be editing tonight. The person going, but we could hit the town. That's more fun. That's the path of least resistance. So why don't we just do that? I say this because if I was to really look back on the last 5 years of my life, the thing I'm really proud of, actually the thing I'm the most proud of, is the community of people I have around me. And I think there's a dark side of this where I'm not really friends with many people from my high school anymore. And I'm not really friends with anyone from college really anymore. I've got a couple. And even in my professional life, there was this whole friend group in Los Angeles that I didn't really vibe with, or we didn't really value the same things. And that friend group has been dropped. And the people I have in my life are very particular. And I can confidently say that every single person that I have in my life moves me, pushes me in a way that I want. Another thing I've heard is there's 2 types of people that'll enter your life. There are expanders and there's contractors, people that expand your world. They make you think differently. They make you look at life in a way that's thrilling. And then there's people that contract your mind. People that, don't do any of that. It's obvious. And I can really confidently say that every single person, especially the people that I see the most often on a week-to-week basis, expand my life in a way that I'm really proud of. We expand each other's creativity. We expand each other's health, ambitions. And that's really important. The people you surround yourself with is the biggest factor to it's the biggest factor to your potential level. I really believe that. I think it's an easy prediction of how far someone will go if you see their friends. Take out any of their own singular traits. They could be the most hardworking person. They could have the most talent. I really do believe that if that person who's extremely talented, hardworking, has 4 to 5 or 10 just contracting friends, that person isn't going to go far. Don't bet on me because I think I'm going to win. Bet on me because the people around me won't let me fail. I truly believe that. I think that's what gives me a lot of conviction in my own life. Maybe that's delusional, but I'm going to live in that delusion. Number 4. Piece of advice number 4. I have this tattooed on my body. It's a little monkey that is holding up a sign that says, "What's P?" What's P is one of the biggest lessons that comes to me once every 3 months. And it hits me in the face because I'll forget about it. And then it comes back to me and I go, that was the answer. So let me tattoo it on my body. What's P stands for what's priority. And in basic terms, it's just a reminder that focus is so much more important than people think. In our company, I don't like using that word company, on my team, we have a rule. We kind of have a saying that's like, was today a high-fiveable day? Right? Was today, at the end of the day, we go, man, we did a good job today. And the days that aren't high-fiveable are very correlated to days where we're sort of scattered. Like for me personally, I did some emails, but I also edited and I also wrote, and I started the day not with any big like to-do list. And I just sort of like did things that felt productive, but not with any direction. And especially in a creative field, it's a big lesson to realize that some activities require way more brain space and have a much higher switching cost than other activities. And if I enter the day being like, all right, today's the day I'm going to edit, but I start that day with doing some emails and like admin work, or even starting that day maybe consuming, scrolling, it is way harder for me to get myself into that mind space to edit. Secondly, if you only go on this autopilot of just doing tasks to feel productive but not really having a focus, what's going to end up happening is you do all the easy tasks that give you those sort of like dopamine hits of, oh, today was a productive day. But the hard tasks, the path of most resistance tasks, which are often usually the things that you need to get done, just sort of get pushed. And that's why when I reflect back on a week and I go, man, I really should have gotten that edit done. But what did I do the first 3 days? Oh, I just didn't prioritize it. That's where things get real disappointing. And that's not a high-fiveable week. What's P? Starting every day with knowing what is your priority and sticking to it. We have a new saying in our company, in our team, that's what are the 3 most important things you need to get done in the next 18 hours? And are we all aligned? And if that's true, like maybe there's 5 really important things, but only pick 3. The other 2 might come later, and you best not touch the other 2 if you told me these are your 3. Honestly, this is the start of week 4, I believe, in the calendar year. And the first 2-3 weeks of this work year has been amazing. We feel really productive. We're taking strides in a way that I'm really excited about. I'll give you the Tages Outtakes members this. Our first video is slated to come out on February 14th. And it's shaping up to be a video that I'm really proud of. And it's because I'm doing a lot of the hard stuff proactively because I set out for that to be my priority. What's P? What's P? What's P? What's P? Focus. You look at any of the greats, they are so focused. Steve Jobs, again, I mentioned him earlier, and honestly, I will mention him again. But I remember there's a video of Kevin O'Leary talking about when he invested in Apple, he met Steve Jobs and like what made Steve Jobs different. He said he will look at the 1,000 things he needs to do in a day. 997 of them, he'll call them noise. Yes, they're important, but he'll only focus on those 3. And if you can understand focus, and I promise you, it sounds so trite. You hear this growing up that focus is important, but true focus is unbelievable what you can get done. It feels superhuman. And I think the thing is, if you have a dream and a goal and you really just focus on that, it's one of those things that makes it feel impossible not to get done. What's P? What is priority? What is priority today in getting that thing done over anything else? What is the signal? What is the noise? Cut the noise, do the signals. All right. And the last one. This is one of my favorite things I've heard. And I think it's given also it's really meaningful to me because I'm very fortunate to live a very creative life. And I can wake up every morning and the first thing I get to think about is things that sort of make no sense in a way. I get to think about cameras and, research and interviewing people, or like even I'll start a day where I just play piano. And that's the most important thing to me that day. And I'm really proud of the life that I've set up for myself. I think I'm really ambitious and I want to be a great artist. And so much of what I've done is setting myself up right for that. I came from a background that was really traditional, really business minded. And I would just follow the path that was sort of laid on me from the people of authority, right? Do well in middle school so you can get into the AP classes in high school. Do well in those AP classes so you can get ahead in college. Go to a good college so you have job security in the future. And, then try to get married by 30, have kids and live in it's like there's these things that we hear growing up all the time. And there's a part of me that went, okay, this is it. This is the playbook. This is the playbook for life. Now, what I'm about to say might sound harsh. At one point in my life, I remember looking at all of these rules and, not to dog my parents, they were a big force in these rules, right? But there's also this statistic that like 55% of Americans specifically are sort of depressed. That's scary. And another crazy high statistic of people that don't have a lot of money, financial security in their life. I think it was something like most Americans don't have like a $400 emergency saving in their life. That's also scary. So if you're telling me majority of people are not in a place that is good, but that formula that they followed is the one that I grew up on, something's broken. That's at least the way my brain works. If they followed this formula and 1 out of 2 people aren't doing too hot, should I be following this formula? Again, this might sound very careless and cocky, and I'm sure 10 years from now, Tejas is going to look back at this clip and go, okay, this guy's talking out of his ass, but I'm going to continue it. I'm going to go for it. I want to be a little careless right now. Again, I mentioned there's another Steve Jobs quote. Guess who's an idol of mine? Everything around you that you call life is made up by people no smarter than you. And he goes on in that video to talk about how you grow up and you're told that life is what is supposed to be kept in this box and stay in this box and don't go too close to the edges of this box. But at one point, you should go close to the edges and you should push the box and see what comes out of the other end. And oftentimes, the rules that are given to you are rules for a reason, and you're going to be wrong. But that shouldn't stop you from questioning those rules around you. That's life. And for me, practically, when I think about this, I think about dropping out of school to pursue TikTok in a time that was so chaotic. But it's worked out in a way. And in that time, it was not the logical thing to do. Obviously, the logical thing to do was to finish school. But I looked at my odds and I went, okay, I think if I didn't continue school, the worst that would happen is I would lose an $8,000 scholarship and maybe would have to redo some classes later on. And I was like, okay. But this sort of ego or this sort of, oh, I'm breaking the standard and now calling myself a college dropout is a word that is going to affect me, apparently. Why does that matter? You know? Even I think about, there was this time where I was hosting a Nickelodeon show and I got casted into this Nickelodeon show because of what I was posting on social media, not because I created any sort of self-tapes or went through the traditional casting process. That was such an eye-opening experience to me because I realized that my TikToks at the time were sort of self-tapes and auditions. And I take this rule today with me in a lot of different aspects, especially when it comes to making YouTube videos. There's a rule book on how to make a YouTube video, but has anyone questioned, what if you break those rules? What if the first 30 seconds of your video doesn't have to be so high-paced and high-cut and like, I'm obsessed with keeping it one shot for the first 30 seconds and seeing if I could still retain people. Or fitness-wise, you're supposed to do 3 sets of bench press. What if I did 2 but went to failure? How much better is that? What if I did 4? How much better or worse is that? There's this part of me that questions everything. My bio on Instagram is I'm ruthlessly inquisitive right now. And I think inquisitive sometimes has a really bad rap, which is true maybe, but I'm really proud of that bone in my body. I think it keeps me delusional. I think a lot of my deprogramming, unprogramming of the last couple years has been taking this sort of logical business brain that I think is fueled by ego and this wanting to be accepted into the majority and going, what if we broke that system? And maybe you're right. And if you're right, you'll be the first person to hear that you're right. But what if you're wrong? What if you're wrong? I think a person that also really follows this and is Elon Musk. And I know there's another story of him when he was making SpaceX. And I'm going to butcher this story, so take it with a grain of salt. But I think there was there was a story where he was trying to order parts for a spaceship. And all these parts had a plastic tip or something to protect this that really increased the costs. And he went, why do we need this plastic tip? And they're like, I don't know, to protect this piece. And he said, and I think he has a rule that goes, if you ever say something like that, like something has to be a certain way, you need to tell me when that rule was made and who said that rule and how does it obey the laws of physics. The only rules he follows are the laws of physics. And that person couldn't, so he was like, ship me a bunch of these pieces without the plastic tip, and ended up cutting costs like by millions or something like that. And I find that fascinating. And I kind of take that as a piece of advice going forward. I think that's really important to be able to just question the rules that people tell you, dogma, question dogmatic rules. I think I used that word correctly. Maybe not. Okay. To run through them, advice number 1, at a very meta level, beware of advice. It can at times be more harmful than good. Advice number 2, my goal or the goal is to increase your surface area of luck potential. Actually, let me make these I. Like, I don't want to prescribe advice. I don't want to be a hypocrite to this whole video. I think advice can be more harmful than be good, so I'm being aware of that. My goal is to increase my surface area of luck potential and experience more, even if it means going into an uncomfortable situation. Oftentimes, do the thing that'll give you more inputs about life than rejecting that experience at all. Friends, be really picky. I'm going to be really picky with the friends I have in my life and the inputs that matter to me. What's P? Actually, that is the one I'm going to prescribe to everyone. What's P? Always question yourself, what's P? What's P? What's P? What is genuinely priority? And stick to it. Everything else is noise. There's a million things you could be doing, but doing the million things isn't going to be as productive and as focused as doing the 3 things you need to get done in the next 18 hours. And everything around you that you call life is made up by people no smarter than you. I take that so to heart. I'm so ruthlessly inquisitive. I question everything, knowing that I will be wrong 99% of the time, but the 1% that I'm right could be huge. Thank you for watching. I was going to give this outtakes channel, since you guys are awesome and are willing to listen to me, always little updates of where I'm at in my main channel. The first video is slated to be out on February 14th. It's one I'm really excited about. We're sort of pushing the boundaries of what we're already doing. It's been a long time since I've uploaded, but I feel really good about it. We've got a really cool strategy coming up this year. So take a look at that. Keep an eye out for that, I'll see you next week. Happy Sunday.